senator from Utah.
I ask unanimous consent to suspend the quorum call.
Without objection.
Mr. President, it is a shame that we don't have more of an opportunity to pass more bills, particularly bills that are uncontroversial. This is an opportunity that we should take to pass non-controversial bills every time we get the chance. We have 4 bills coming out of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee that we can, and I believe we should, pass today. Bills with no substantive objections that I'm aware of. Bills that have been cleared by both parties in the Senate. Bills that will have positive impact for Americans that the bills themselves were designed to serve. And yet, sadly, I'm anticipating an objection today when I offer those up for passage. So why am I anticipating an objection? Well, Mr. President, I'm looking forward to hearing from my friend and colleague from New Mexico, Senator Heinrich, on what objections he might have to a bill from Senator Hawley that would designate America's Churchill Museum in Missouri as a National Historic Landmark. I'm looking forward to hearing from him what problems he might have with Senator Padilla's uncontroversial bill to adjust the boundaries of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Looking forward to hearing what changes he would propose to Senator Husted's bill, which simply adjusts the boundaries of the Dayton Aviation Heritage National Historical Park, or what he thinks would be harmed by passing a bill from Senator Gillibrand and Minority Leader Schumer, his own colleagues on the other side of the aisle, that would establish the Fort Ontario Holocaust Refuge Shelter National Historical Park. Mr. President, all the bills that I'm offering have passed out of this body, and did in fact pass out of this body last year with unanimous support, not just bipartisan, but unanimous support. All are locally supported, all should be passed today. And I fear they might not be, and I'm really looking forward to looking forward to hearing why my colleague might want to stop these. Because if there are real substantive objections to these bills, any of them, bring them forward. I'll be the first to work with him or others who may have concerns on those. Perhaps then we can work to improve the bill and resolve what concerns might exist around it to get it to a place where everyone's happy with it and where we can get something done for the American people. After all, this is the business of lawmaking. But, Mr. President, I don't think we're likely to hear substantive objections today. Based on what I've heard, I don't anticipate that my friend and colleague, Senator Heinrich, will offer substantive objections or changes that he wants made to these particular bills. I hope I'm wrong. But if he doesn't have any problems with the substance of the bills, then why not let them pass? Well, there is a tendency sometimes exhibited in the Senate, and I've seen it done by people of both political parties and by members at different ends of the political continuum from time to time. When members want leverage, sometimes they will reach for whatever is popular, in some cases even what is uncontroversial. Now, during the shutdown, we saw a parallel use of the technique, with some using air traffic controllers, TSA officers, and Coast Guard families as pressure points because the public trusted those people and needs the services that they routinely and uniquely perform. And sometimes members, again, of both political parties and of every political persuasion will sometimes use popular bills the same way. In other words, they'll oppose popular, non-controversial bills, not because they are controversial or unpopular, but because they are uncontroversial and popular. They're blocked because their broad support makes them useful cargo for a lands package or another aggregated legislative vehicle packed with measures that might not withstand scrutiny under the light of day if they were considered on their own, or even when paired with a small handful of other bills. Instead of moving bills off the floor one by one or two by two in a transparent bipartisan process, some would prefer a really big omnibus package, often prepared by staff behind closed doors, where only a few senators and no members of the public are participating or even allowed to participate. Then members are told to take it or leave it in its entirety, up or down, binary choice. No other option, no amendments, no adequate time for debate. Simply take it all or leave it all, even the uncontroversial and the popular. Now, this puts many of us, particularly those of us from public land states, like Utah, where the federal government owns 2/3 of the land, in a difficult position. In states like mine, almost every action requires some sort of mother may I from the federal government. This is not a process that can continue, at least not one that can continue without causing a lot of other problems. So as chairman of the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources Committee, I've set out to change that. I've set out to, at least with regard to non-controversial bills that have passed the Senate in the last year unanimously, it's a good place to start, where there is consensus, because there is consensus. I've made clear that my aim was to build on the progress from last year when this body passed out 41 bills. And to that end, I've suggested that we should start by passing the bills, at least a few of them, paired Republican and Democrat bills at the same time, bills that passed the Senate unanimously last year, including bills that the ranking member himself agreed to less than a year ago. And again, if there's a policy objection, then let's hear it. I'm more than willing to work with, to address whatever substantive objections there might be. But these bills should pass in the light of day, where every member, Republican or Democrat or independent, can be part of the process. Mr. President, this has been going on back and forth in one way or another for a few months. In May, I came to the floor and asked unanimous consent to pass 2 Republican bills alongside 2 Democrat bills, both of which, like the bills that are at issue today, passed the Senate unanimously last year. This drew an objection from the other side of the aisle. In July, I came to the floor again and offered to work with the ranking member on these bills. I offered 2 additional Republican and 2 Democrat bills that passed out of this body last year, also with unanimous support, and it drew the same objection. Now, as always, I've offered to work with the ranking member and the minority if they have any substantive concerns on any of these bills, and I make that offer again now. But as you may see in just a moment, as I suspect we'll see, I can't tell the future, that I haven't heard any substantive policy concerns with them. Now, a small minority of members who want to block bills, including bills supported by, introduced by, sponsored by members of their own caucus, just because they want them in a broader package, isn't going to cut it. Now, 2 weeks ago, you had the junior senator from Alaska, Senator Sullivan, came to the floor and asked consent to pass his bill to give Alaska Native Vietnam veterans the land they earned and have long been owed. At the request of Senator Padilla and the ranking member, Senator Sullivan, paired his bill with the bill from Senator Gallego, keeping it bipartisan. However, to the surprise of Senator Sullivan and the Native Vietnam veterans who were relying on the legislation, this too drew the aforementioned objection. Moving the goalposts, again, that process isn't defensible, it's not sustainable, it's not going to work. It's not going to work for a whole host of reasons, including the fact that I've heard from our counterparts in the House of Representatives, including in a conversation as recently as just a couple of hours ago with Chairman Westerman, my committee chairman counterpart on the House of Representatives side, that this is problematic. They want them to come over, not as a big sewn-together package, but that as bills, even if passed while paired over here, will also be paired over there. Sometimes the concern is raised, well, then Democrat bills will suffer and atrophy over there while Republican bills are prioritized and passed to the exclusion of the Democrat bills. This is not true. In fact, because these bills are passed as a matter of course, routinely passed under suspension of the rules on the House side. And I believe suspension of the rules requires a supermajority of about 290 votes. These always end up getting paired together. You end up with Democrat-Republican balance as they submit them on the floor. So today I'll again ask the minority to work with me to pass both Republican and Democrat bills. Bills that, yet again, are non-controversial and have passed this body unanimously within the last year. These 4 bills are just the start. I have a list of 19 bills that Republicans are prepared to pass today. My staff has shared the list with the ranking member's staff. In fact, we did so weeks ago, and yet we continue to hear talk of an objection today. I'm willing to commit to working with my colleagues on the lands bills they wish to pass, with the understanding that as we bring them to the floor to try to pass them by unanimous consent, we'll continue to pair them so that there's balance. So please, let's work together. We can do this. This isn't hard. There's a lot in the legislative process that is difficult. The last thing we ought to be doing are making the areas where we do agree, where there is unanimity, to make that too part of the unresolvable conundrum of bills. And another thing happens. If we do this, it tends to slow down the process. Last year, there was an effort to try to sew a bunch of these together for one sort of year-end lands package. And one thing led to another, and we got to the end of the year, which was the end of the Congress. And as the list got bigger, it got more and more difficult to sustain it. Whereas if we go a little bit at a time, we pair a few Republican bills and a few Democrat bills, bring them forward, pass them by unanimous consent, little by little throughout the 2-year Congress, we're much more likely to be able to achieve passage, not just in the House, but also here. That's a recipe for success. But when we block stuff that's been passed unanimously, where there is no substantive policy objection, it's not the best way to serve those who elected us. The country faces huge challenges. And in many of those challenges, public policy consensus can be difficult, but not impossible to achieve, but much more difficult than it is with these bills, these unanimously passed bills just from last year. Things like, we've got healthcare prices that are soaring, our national debt's out of control. But how can we come together, Mr. President, as a legislative body to tackle these more vexing issues if we can't even agree to something as unanimously supported, as totally non-controversial, as a proposal to adjust the boundaries of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area that tells them what it's doing and why? Well, the American people deserve bills that succeed or fail on their own merit in a digestible format. They do not deserve a process in which someone can slip a controversial idea past the public without debate by smuggling it into a much broader package consisting mostly, but not entirely, of completely uncontroversial bills. This chamber should reject that approach. If nothing else, then because it has failed. It brought us to failure in the last Congress at the end of last year, just as it will end in failure if we try to do that again. And we've been reminded by our counterparts in the House of Representatives as recently as a few hours ago that it will also contribute to failure over there. We can do better, but this is a start. This won't solve all of our problems or resolve all of our disagreements, but it will bring this one to a close because there is no disagreement here. At the end of the day, this should end today, but only if we insist that bills be able to stand on their own 2 feet and that we're willing to bring them forward one by one, 2 by 2, with Democrat and Republican balance. So to that end, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources be discharged and that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of the following bills en bloc. Further, that the bills be considered read a third time and passed en bloc, and that the motions to these bills, motions to reconsider these bills be considered made and laid upon the table, all en bloc. S-650, America's National Churchill Museum National Historic Landmark Act from Senator Hawley. S-432, the Fort Ontario Holocaust Refugee Shelter National Historical Park Establishment Act from Senator Gillibrand. S-2434, to amend the Dayton Aviation Heritage Preservation Act from Senator Husted. And S-1142, the Golden Gate National Recreation Area from Senator Padilla.
Is there an objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from New Mexico.
Reserving the right to object, Mr. President, what we have in front of us are 4 bills, 2 Democratic and 2 Republican. And my concern remains the same as it was literally 11 months ago, that passing bills one by one does not guarantee their final passage or being signed into law, or that important local priorities from Democratic states will be honored along with those from Republican states. As the chair said, I do not have substantive policy concerns with these particular bills. But we passed a set of bills as a test like this over the summer, and we have seen no action in the House. And continuing to pass individual bills in this manner when we have so many stacked up in committee will be unproductive until our House colleagues work with us on a path to get bills actually signed into law. We need a way to ensure that member priorities, transparently, regardless of size, political party, or state, have a way to be considered and actually become law. This current process is not working, and I remain committed to working with the chair to find a solution that ensures the priorities of both chambers and both parties can be met. In the meantime, I do have a proposal for the chair. I would like to take these 4 bills and pass them together under a single bill number. This is not a large omnibus package. These have all been vetted. Each bill in this set has been supported by the Republican caucus and the chair, and it remains 2 Democratic priorities and 2 Republican priorities. But by combining these bills together under one bill number, it helps to ensure that none of the priorities are left behind on the cutting room floor, and all have an equal pathway to becoming law. And therefore, I would ask that the senator modify his request, and instead the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of my bill, which combines the text of the aforementioned 4 bills and is at the desk, that the bill be considered read 3 times and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there an objection to the modification?
Mr. President,
Senator from Utah.
Reserving the right to object. Look, the package just proposed by Senator Heinrich harkens back to a time when the Senate sometimes did those things. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. More recently, it doesn't work. More recently, as recently as a year ago, this proved not to work right here in the Senate. And it's also proven not to work over in the House. Now, my friend and colleague insists that this process isn't working. Well, it's not working only because of this particular objection. And it's not working here only because of these specific pairings suggested to us by the ranking member's own staff a matter of weeks ago. It's not just that he's voted for these within the last year, 11 months ago. It's that these specific pairings were suggested by his own team to mine. And so I don't understand why this means that we should put them all together. Now, let's take it face value. We received word that this was happening just a few hours ago. Just a few hours ago, we got a bill that, to my knowledge, hasn't been read yet. Let's just assume for a second that all that this does is to put the exact text of each of those 4 bills into one larger bill introduced in Senator Heinrich's name and then brought to the floor. I struggle to understand why that is acceptable, but passing them in one fell swoop, in one unanimous consent request on the floor of the Senate is objectionable to him. Now, we've heard a moment ago an argument that I foreshadowed a moment ago, the argument that somehow this would result in Democratic bills in the other chamber being neglected while Republican bills were expedited. Now, were this a concern that were borne out in fact, it would be a reasonable, legitimate one. But we've been told by the House not only that they will pass these, if at all, on the suspension calendar, which requires a supermajority vote, about 290 votes, as I recall, but that because it has to be passed that way over there, they pair them, just as we pair things here quite frequently with uncontroversial bills like this to make sure that we've got party balance between Republican bills and Democrat bills. We've also been promised by them that it will cause problems and will likely signal doom to bills when we sew them all together in one package. That's not how they like to do it over there, and in many cases, it's not how our members want to do it here. From our own colleagues today, some of whom are affected by these bills, who are concerned about what this practice will do to them. And so, look, we've tried to do this. We paired these according to suggestions made by the ranking member's own staff. Requested a meeting with them in September. We were rebuffed. We were declined. I remain ready to meet at any time to discuss how we can do them. And I'm simply trying to move bills that have been sponsored by both Republicans and Democrats in a fair and balanced fashion, in a way that everyone can understand in the member-driven process for which this body was built and rather uniquely designed. And yet my colleague, the ranking member, continues to object. And so it makes me wonder what the end is here. If the end is passing good legislation that we can all agree on, then why not pass these now? This isn't always possible to present bills like this. It's not on every issue. It's not lost on any of us that on most issues we don't have unanimity. Certainly, we pass a lot by unanimous consent, but not everything can pass that way. These bills individually are uncontroversial here, and they are in the House. But they become controversial the minute someone insists that they be sewn together in one package where you have to vote for all of them or none of them in order to get them through. That kind of practice, used by members of both parties at times in the past with varying degrees of success, but less success more recently, is a type of extortion for bills imposed on bills that have no opposition and that have no substantive objections. There's no legitimate reason to not pass these here today, and I can't in good conscience let that process continue. I'll work with any member, Republican and Democrat, including the ranking member, to move non-controversial bills and get them across the finish line for our constituents. And I'll be happy to do it with packages like these that are fair and balanced between the two parties. It's not an objection that's rooted in anything about these bills. It's just the vehicle by which they're presented. But if we have to sew them all together in one package, that's not going to work. It's not going to work here. It's not going to work on the other side of this building. And so I'll continue to come to the floor and try to move these, particularly these non-controversial bills that have passed unanimously within the last year. We'll be back to do this, but on this basis, for the reasons I've articulated, I object.
The objection to the modification is heard. Is there an objection to the original request?
Mr. President,
The senator from New Mexico.
I object to the original request.
The objection is heard.